With the State of the Union speech being 2 hours long, I feel like I have a lot of license this morning. And besides, you aren't going anywhere while it's snowing, so just get cozy, right? We actually had a lovely group of youngish adults at our most recent smorgasbord on Friday night. We literally sat around Daniel and Colton's table and literally broke bread and had wine and then ate some soup, and, well, overall, we just imbibed the joys of friendship and camaraderie. Maybe we dwelled too long on the texture and density of cottage cheese for my liking. But we might have stumbled into the grossest fundraiser imaginable, so stay tuned. Such is the give and take of being in community. We foster a culture of belonging. And that means we all bring our fullest selves and tastes to our relationships and our endeavors. I don't know if that's what comes to mind for you when you think of this most famous of all of Jesus' miracles that Reverend Catherine told us about. Jesus feeding the multitude, a mass of people maybe is what you think, that are at an outdoor concert soaking in the atmosphere and new friendships. Or maybe you just think that they're a horde of curious onlookers and star chasers. Maybe you see them as a group of mostly peasants, struggling to make sense of their lot in life under the Roman Empire's domination. But why else might the crowd have been gathering in that moment? Think back with me to the first reading Greg had for us this morning, just a few moments ago. What happened in that story to John the Baptist? He's brutally executed as a party favor. His truth-telling prophetic voice had become an offense and a threat, and the powers that be put him down. When have we seen that before? A truth-telling voice who became such a threat and offense that he was killed. I mean, take your pick. You can mention the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mahatma Gandhi, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Jesus. We could go on naming so very many others. The fact that we can name so many is precisely because that is the playbook of the empire. To quash any threat to the status quo and its sense of control. What the people felt after John the Baptist's death was surely fear and anger and grief and devastation. All of it culminating then in an intense urgency to gather with other people who are feeling the same sense of despair and lostness. And when they learned that Jesus was near, what else could they do but swarm him? What had he heard yet? What did he think? What does Jesus have to say about it now? That's the context of the feeding of the 5,000. Not joy, anxiety. Not hope, fear. Not curiosity, desperation. And if you remember from a few weeks ago, the context of the author of Mark's gospel to begin with, why he wrote this gospel and who he wrote it to just a few years before he wrote it. The Christians in Rome were grotesquely persecuted and killed by the Emperor Nero, who had scapegoated them as the cause of the Great Fire of Rome. And only a few years after that, the temple in Jerusalem is razed again, destroyed again. And Christians, but especially Jews, were brutally suppressed. The Gospel of Mark was written to a people who were traumatized and terrified and confused about what to do and what to believe and whether any of it was true or worth holding on to in the face of persecution. And the story of John's death would resonate as an echo, not just of Jesus' death that happens later in Mark's gospel, but of Peter and Paul, who died and were executed during Nero's purge. And what follows the story of John's execution? It's people huddling together in the rawness of their emotions and the reality of their experiences. They turn to the person and teachings of Jesus. And what does he offer them? Jesus doesn't offer assurances that he'll topple Herod or the emperor. He offers them spiritual and physical sustenance, a safe space to be and feel and regroup. That's the miracle of what God provides in the moment, the transformative power of belonging and togetherness. The story goes on, as Greg led us, that the disciples get on a boat, and meanwhile Jesus takes time to pray. He's on his own, likely to grieve on his own over the death of John, who was maybe his cousin and certainly the man who baptized him. And then he makes his way toward the disciples, out on that boat while a storm is raging, and out he walks on the water, and they think they see a ghost. It wasn't an uncommon superstition in their day. More specifically, people thought that if you saw a ghost, it was the spirit of someone who died too soon, before their time, a spirit who was restless, an omen, perhaps. The Greek word used here for ghost is phantasma, the idea that something about reality is off. Maybe they couldn't tell it was Jesus, or maybe they could. And maybe that was why they were afraid. Maybe in the swirl of their thoughts and worst fears, they thought they saw a ghost of Jesus. A piercing hint that just like they had with John, the authorities had gotten to Jesus too. Whatever the case of their fear, it tracks with our own. We're on the verge of another war in the Middle East, and we're making a habit now of toppling the leaders of other nations, whether it be Iran or Venezuela, and whether they deserve it or not, the dramatic actions are unleashing anxiety and uncertainty here in the United States. And maybe that's partly a result of our own past experiences with similar wars that have not ended well. Or because we've seen maybe similar instances where our leader has tried to distract us from asking too many questions, or offering too many critiques of his leadership. Once again, it's a playbook we all know by heart. Like the disciples and like that first audience of Mark's gospel, tossed in the tempest of their thoughts, lost in the swirl of their fears and grief, we know these moments. We saw him play out differently but similarly in 2020, after Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd were murdered. We felt it only a few weeks ago when Renee Good was murdered, when Alex Preddy was murdered, shot to death by federal agents sworn to protect them and all of us. We know how the empire works when it is confronted with truth. It takes offense at such courage. as a direct threat to its authority, and then it takes dramatic action. It quashes dissent. It tightens repression. It kills to make an example, to teach people a lesson. All of these are sights we've seen with our own eyes just in the past few weeks. Near verbatim quotes we've heard with our own ears from the mouths of other ICE and CBP agents in the aftermath of these killings. Maybe what the disciples saw is what most people see, whether we are honest about it or not. Maybe they saw what they knew from past experience. The seeming inevitability of imperial power. So what does Jesus do? He steps in and he speaks up like so many times before, only this time he brings words of comfort, not confrontation. Don't be afraid. It's okay. It's me, he says. The Greek here is more awkward to our English-speaking selves. He literally says, don't be afraid, I am. The I am is an echo back to the name God self-ascribes in the story of Moses in the burning bush. When he says, tell them, I am has sent you. For Mark and Jesus, the words are a reminder to their hearers of the vitality of their faith. And they are offering a subversive counter-narrative to the propaganda of the empire. The seeming inevitability of imperial power is nothing compared to the imminent eternality of God's presence. Put another way, in the context of authoritarian tactics, Jesus is the something off about our current reality. His teachings, his way of living, his kingdom, he is the catalyst, the agitator, the challenge to the system's survival. And in simply naming himself with the phrase, I am, he is making a claim about his own divinity, but he's also asserting that God has entered the fight alongside all who are suffering, under oppression and all who are resisting repression. When it comes to the ways of the world and unchecked power, Jesus is the something off. The kingdom of God is the something off kilter. It's upside down and inside out, and it's proposing to turn our world right side up by flattening hierarchies and reframing power as love and togetherness and belonging and collaboration. By reimagining the world not as enemies to conquer, but kindred to embrace. Jesus' actions and words get clouded over in this chapter by that miraculous feeding of the multitude. But that's often what happened in his day, too. Even his own disciples lose sight of the right things. The miracle, to me, seems to be in the multitude itself. The nourishment and sustenance that we find together. And then Jesus goes off to pray and to grieve. And then he comes back and he speaks up again with the disciples to not be afraid. And I guess I want to say to liberals, it's a reminder to us that the spiritual side of faith really does matter. We can't fight the fight without nurturing our spirits, without centering ourselves in something and around and on someone greater than ourselves. And I suppose there's a message for conservatives too. The gospel doesn't end with Jesus walking on the water, naming his divinity, and then being quiet. He got back out into the fray, and he spoke up for what he believed in. He called out the authorities and didn't tolerate their abuse. He was brave. And it cost him his life. But he did it because that was what was right. He was a child of God first and foremost. A citizen of his country was far from the highest priority of his identity and purpose. May it be the same for you, for all of us. I don't know, maybe there is a uniting message for all of us today. Divided as ever we've been, frightened as ever, a message that transcends time and location, be it the people in Jesus' day when this may have happened, or the Christians under persecution who may have heard Mark's story. The gospel is like a ghost, a restless spirit, a growing sense that something is off in what we have always known. A warning, perhaps, a promise for certain, a phantasma of faith, as unsettling as it is hopeful. That is God that you're seeing. God is here now. That is God at work in and through and among us. God is in it with us, leading us not onto battlefields but around tables, bringing us not to the precipice of war but to the margins of society, pleading with each and every one of us not to be silent, but reminding us that we find our voices, our courage, our entire purpose together alongside each other. My friends, brave FBCWU, the phantasma is here, even now, a kingdom, a community, a smorgasbord of love. Amen.